Be seated, please. Mazel tov. And now it is our special joy to invite Ella Yardain, one of the newest members of the Jewish people, to come forward with her family for a special blessing of welcome. Malach.
Amalach Goeloti, Amalach Goeloti, Mikora, Yivarech Etonarim, Vayakarev Behem Shemi.
Okay, in just a minute, we'll say Shechina and this paragraph. Just a minute. God and Creator, happy parents Haley and Yoni have come into your presence to voice the longings of their hearts in prayer. Give them the wisdom to teach their child to be faithful to the heritage of the household of Israel, that she may grow up with the knowledge that you are always near to her, guiding and sustaining her. Keep open the eyes of her spirit, that she may ever be conscious of the beauty and the wonder of your world. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam gomel chasadim tovim. Praised are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, whose love and kindness extend to all the world.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
Amen.
O God, for the gift of this child, we give thanks, praying that we will be worthy of the blessing and responsibility of parenthood. May we show our gratitude to you by leading our daughter in the way of righteousness. Teach us to guide and instruct her, and
that she may grow to be
loyal
loyal to
Judaism and a worthy member of the Jewish community.
Amen. Mishaberach imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May the one who blessed our ancestors now bless this new baby, this new life, with long life and with good health. May she be a joy to her parents. May she live to bring honor to the household of Israel, blessing to all humanity, and glory to the name of God. And we at Holy Blossom will be your partners in raising her so that she can pursue a life of Torah, Chuppah, U'Ma'asim Tovim, a life of learning, a life of family, simcha, and a life filled with deeds of kindness and justice. Now, in the presence of loved ones, in the presence of her neighboring congregation, we give to this child the name Ella Yardain Bat Yonatan V'Chava Norit. May it become a name honored and respected for wisdom and good deeds. May God's blessing rest upon her now and always. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Yael Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha. Shalom. We have written Ella's name into Holy Blossom Temple's archival record, founded in 1856. She's in very good company. And we have a gift for you, actually a few gifts for you, including a hand-knit sweater from the women of Holy Blossom. I'm going to catch you afterwards. So Mazal Tov, and Mazal Tov to your family who's here from near and far, all the way from Israel. And may you go from simcha to simcha. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I'm so glad you shared her with us. Thank you. It takes a village to raise a Jewish child, and it is our mission and our privilege to do so. Here we go. Now, some arguments are better than others. The Talmud offers this. Whether or not it really went down like this, God only knows. But the story goes that a Caesar once said to Rabbi Tanchum, "Come, let us all become one people." And the rabbi replied, "Very well, but since we Jews are circumcised and cannot become like you, then you should be circumcised and become like us." "Well spoken," the Caesar admitted. "But you know that anyone who defeats the emperor in an argument must be thrown to the lions." So they threw Rabbi Tanchum into the arena, but the lions did not eat him. Now the story could have ended there, but it continues. A heretic was standing nearby, observing the scene, and because he did not believe in God's power to protect, he argued the only reason the lions did not eat the rabbi is because they weren't hungry. And so what did they do? They threw the unbeliever into the arena to test his case, and indeed, the lions devoured him. So it seems that some arguments are better than others. This story is not only recorded some 1,200 years ago to tell of Jewish life under Roman rule, it is not only recorded to speak of the theology of reward and punishment. It is not only there to talk about how peoples differ from one another, but also to point to the ethics and the rules of engaging in debate. It seems that yes, some arguments are better than others. Judaism, Jewish legal discourse, Jewish culture all place great value on debate. We have elevated it to an art form. In fact, Rabbi Kay offered a course earlier this year in machloket, debate. And when I meet with wedding couples to help them prepare not only for their wedding day, but also for their marriage, which we pray will last a lifetime, I ask them, how do you argue? And some couples say, oh, we never argue. That worries me. Some admit we know what buttons to push when we're arguing, and we know sometimes we are hurtful to one another. And so that opens up a conversation about what is a good and healthy and loving way to argue. And what is true for two people in love is true for the Jewish people as a whole. Now, it isn't clear if Korach from this week's Torah portion wants to replace Moses or Aaron, but it is clear that he's looking for a public showdown. They assembled themselves against Moses and against Aaron, it is written. And then it is written, Rav lachem, you have gone too far. This argument is not in keeping within the bounds of fair debate. It is not a healthy way of arguing. You have gone too far. In Jewish tradition, Korach is the arch-demagogue who lusts over power to inflate his own prominence, not in service of God and the Jewish people. This is so much so that the rabbis of the Mishnah famously say, Kol machloket shehi l'shem shamayim sofa lehitkayem. Any dispute which is for the sake of heaven, in the end, will have lasting worth. And on the other hand, any debate, any machloket that is not for the sake of heaven, ein sofa lehitkayem. Any debate that is not for the sake of heaven, in the end, will have no lasting worth. And so it was for Korach. The rabbis say Korach is the prime example. Out of all the examples they could point to, Korach is the prime example of the one who led an argument that was not for the sake of heaven. Maimonides of the 12th century teaches that the ingredient which makes all the difference in the outcome of any debate is the intent of those involved. And so the rabbis say, who is the prime example of people who are motivated to hold arguments that are for the sake of heaven? They are none other than Hillel and Shammai. They did not argue for power. They did not argue to embarrass or to harm or to diminish. Instead, their dispute was for the sake of heaven. Providing positive insights and permanent solutions was the goal of their investigation, their intellectual and spiritual investigations. Now, we have all been part of those kinds of exhilarating conversations where each partner listens intently to the other, Perhaps a mark of an argument that is not for the sake of heaven, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, is that while the other person is talking, you're not really listening, but you are crafting your next line of argument. What will be the next clever thing that I will say? For the sake of heaven means that both participants leave the conversation having learned something of value one from the other. Elsewhere in the Torah, in the Talmud, there is a famous recording that provides a paradigm for much of Jewish life. Our models are the schools of Hillel and Shammai. For 3 years, they were locked in a debate. The former claimed the law is according to our view, the latter claimed the law is in accordance with our view, and then a bat kol, an echo of a heavenly voice, issued the decree, Elu ve'elu. Both the teachings of this one and of that one are the words of the living God. But the law is in agreement with the school of Hillel. So both were the words of the living God, and at the end of the day, we do need an answer to provide a path forward. The later generation of sages ask, since both are the words of the living God, what is the reason for Hillel, the school of Hillel, winning out the debate over the law? And the answer comes because they were humble, and because they studied not only their own legal arguments, but they sincerely and intently studied the arguments of the school of Shammai as well. They even mentioned the teachings of the school of Shammai before mentioning their own. The ethical way in which the school of Hillel made their arguments also made them more likely than their opponents to reach truthful conclusions. Because they were kind, because they were humble, their egos did not prevent them from acknowledging truths stated by the other side. And think of how polarized our world is right now. Never does one seem to ever lift up the hint of truth that is in the argument of the other, the worth, the value that is in the argument of the other. Furthermore, the school of Hillel made a point of studying their opponents' positions, not only their own, and this guaranteed that they would, through examination on all sides of the issue, they would come to greater insight and greater truth. The school of Shammai, it seemed, could not self-correct because they only understood their own point of view, and they did not study the other angles. Now, back to Korach. We're told that this kind of argument will always fail. Labriut. When it is for the sake of a power grab, whether in the political arena or in the social circles or even spiritual spheres, if it is meant to undermine or to hurt, that kind of argument will never produce substantive results. Korach and his band challenged Moses and Aaron in order to gain personal power and glory, but their schemes would not hold. In fact, the earth came and swallowed them whole, and they disappeared from the congregation. Earlier this week, there was a gathering of Toronto Jewish leadership. The meeting came at the invitation of President of Israel, Herzog. Toronto is one of the 15 designated cities from across the globe that were asked to hold meetings to assess the relationship between Israel and the diaspora. The project, designed by none other than Deloitte, is called Kol Ha'am, the voice of the people. And I want you to know that Holy Blossom Temple was very well represented. I believe we were 7 strong at this collection, at this gathering of more than 200. In President Herzog's opening address, he explained that machloket l'shem shamayim is the Jewish ideal. An argument for the sake of heaven is the Jewish ideal. And he worries that not only are we incapable of holding such a kind of debate, but that we have lost altogether the ability to talk to one another. And so there is urgency now to open up the lines of communication and to rediscover and redefine our common denominators. Herzog emphasized the Jewish ideal of healthy debate, and he called for a global Beit Midrash from South Africa to the Americas, to Australia and across Europe. These 15 cities are think tanks like a global Beit Midrash, where debate, he says, must be inclusive, compelling, and healing. Now, if I'm honest, I could end the sermon right here, and that might be Dayenu. But if we're honest, and I must always be honest with my people, even that ideal model of the debate between the schools of Hillel and Shammai, we learn from our sacred texts, even that debate was at risk. The Talmud attests that the differences between the two schools did not harm the personal relations between them. They treated one another with affection, but over time, things began to break down until finally, the insufficiently trained disciples of Shammai and Hillel debated with one another dangerously and spread controversy throughout the people of Israel. It was as if, and this is painful to say, it was as if there became two Torahs. God forbid. God forbid in our time there should be two Torahs. Ultimately, according to the Jerusalem Talmud, the disciples of the school of Shammai stood below slaughtering the disciples of the school of Hillel. 6 of them ascended, while the rest threatened them with swords and spears. Only 6 were unwilling to go in the direction of civil war. We see that even an argument which is originally established for the sake of heaven can eventually unravel into a downward spiral of violence. And so, in the midst of this raging debate between Jewish people everywhere, and there is more than just one debate, let me lift up the teaching of Israel Salanter, our leading 19th century moralist, who warns us to use caution before aspiring to any debate, even when we believe it is for the sake of heaven. Perhaps he speaks from personal experience when Salanter says, the greatest danger is to believe that your dispute is for a heavenly cause. Because if you believe it is for a heavenly cause, then you will go to the mat, and that argument will drag on and on and on. Now, I believe that some of the debates that are playing out in the streets of Israel every Saturday night, every Motzei Shabbat, with demonstrations and flags and speeches, and I believe that some of the debates that are raging in the Knesset, and I believe that some of the debates that are raging in the Supreme Court are, in fact, for the sake of heaven. I believe that some of the debates that are taking place among diaspora Jewry, including right here at Holy Blossom Temple, with the help of our Israel Dialogue series and other initiatives for Israel engagement, these are for the sake of heaven. And I believe that the debates that are taking hold at many family Shabbat dinner tables, like the Tile family, 4 generations strong at your Shabbat dinner table, with healthy and respectful and loving and charged debate, these are also for the sake of heaven. None of these should be fueled by Korach's greed or arrogance or hatred, God forbid. They are instead for the sake of determining no less than the Jewish character of the Jewish state. They are for the sake of no less than determining the democratic nature of the state of Israel. They are for the sake of determining no less than the relationship between Israel and diaspora Jewry. Let us be forever one people, Am Echad, with one Torah. The stakes are very high. The rules of engagement will never determine the outcome. The rules of engagement will always determine the outcome. How we argue will determine the resolution of the argument. So let us heed the warning of our Musar masters, who warn about the nature of even a heavenly debate. When it is intended for heaven's sake, we should take extra care. And I will conclude with the final teaching of Yechezkel Landau. Please heed my advice, he says, and make room for shalom. For there is nothing worse than discord. These days, controversies for the sake of God are rarely found, and Satan rejoices. So I implore you, Rabbi Landau says, make peace, oseh shalom bimromav, and let God, who is able to make peace in the highest of heavens, let peace rain down on the people of Israel, on the state of Israel, on the land of Israel with all of its inhabitants. And together we say, Amen.